All persons having cause, action pending, summoned, bound to appear herein shall take the notice thereof and give their attention according to the law. The Honorable Judge H. Gordon Hall presiding. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Marshal. Good morning, everyone.
Court is now in session. You may be seated.
I understand there's an exhibit that the state neglected to ask to be made a full exhibit. It's marked for identification. Is that correct, Mr. Devlin?
Yes, actually two. Exhibit number 37 and 38 are medical records of the defendant and Mr. Suleiman. And I'd ask to reopen the state's case briefly for the limited purpose of moving the full admission of those two items.
Any objection, Mr.
no objection.
Riccio? All right, that motion is granted. And so you're moving the admission as full exhibits of those two?
Correct.
Okay, and any objection, Mr. Riccio, to that?
No.
Okay, so those are both 37 and 38 full. And then you rest again?
Yes, I do. State rest.
Okay. And then, Mr. Riccio, do you have any business for the court right now?
I do, Your Honor. Before the defense begins its case, at this point in time, the Connecticut Practice Book allows for the defense to make a motion pursuant to Section 4240 for a motion for a judgment of acquittal. According to that Practice Book section, once the state closes its case, the court is asked to analyze, in a light most favorable to the state, whether or not the state has, whether a rational trier of fact could find that the crimes were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I filed a written motion sort of echoing what it is I'm arguing. I did that for purposes of making sure that the court has all the law that it needs. I know it knows it, but just to make sure that the citations were correct. So 4240 allows us to recur. During the 4 days that the state proffered its case, the vast majority of the witnesses that testified were law enforcement officers. Those officers, whether they be state or city police, testified and gave their opinions about what they saw, what they felt, what they gleaned from this incident. Trooper Jackson, Officer Rappa concluded that they themselves felt that they were, due to Mr. Suleiman, in fear of death or serious bodily injury. And without recapping what the other officer said, the other officers essentially stated, in summary, that there was an inability to de-escalate, there was an inability and an impossibility to act any different. I do want to point out as well that when you look at the law that's applicable to this charge and then the law that's going to be given to the jury, though that hasn't found its final form yet, what we do know is that the charge itself of manslaughter in the first degree, as charged by the state, is accusing Brian North of recklessness, and he acted with an extreme indifference to human life. There hasn't been any evidence as to essentially what is the standard of care that a police officer should act with, and how did he breach that duty. One of the jury instructions talks about, and the court will likely inform the jury, that in order for the state to prove its case, there's this analysis of subjective reasonableness and objective reasonableness. Is what Trooper North thought was reasonable, is what the objectively reasonable person thought was reasonable. And there's no evidence, there was no expert testimony to that effect. Now, the case would be different if it was, if it was a burglary case or a self-defense case, someone's burglarizing a home and someone shoots the burglar. You could say, well, the reasonable person who owns a home acted a certain way. But here, the court is going to inform the jury that this is what is a reasonable police officer, what should a reasonable police officer done? And there's no evidence to this point as to what is the objective reasonableness of what a police officer is and how did Trooper North violate that standard of care.
Are you saying that it's expert testimony is required?
I'm not saying it's required. I'm just saying that the record to this point is devoid of anything that suggests here's what the standard of care is and here's how Trooper North violated that standard of care. Relying upon the jury instructions that in some form will go to this jury. So in summary, and as the written materials support, the evidence isn't sufficient for a rational trier of fact to convict Trooper North beyond a reasonable doubt of the single crime charged, and that there has been no evidence proffered to this court regarding any standard of care and how that standard was breached. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Devlin.
I would ask the court to deny the motion for a couple of reasons. One is construing the evidence in most favorable to the state. I mean, there's been no claim of justification introduced into this case yet. There's no claim that Mr. North acted to defend himself or a third party. And so I think that argument is inapplicable to the state of the record right now. I don't think a case like this would necessarily require expert testimony connection whether, and I would say that the fact that this evidence proves that the defendant was the shooter with a gun, fired 7 shots, causing the death of Mubarak Solomon as Solomon was in this car surrounded by police officers and other police cars. That's sufficient for the jury to pass on that. So I would ask the court to deny the motion.
Okay. So in this case, in this situation, with a motion such as this pending before the court, the standard that the court is to employ is, as Mr. Devlin just sort of summarized, viewing the evidence in the record in the light most favorable to the state, could a reasonable jury find that the state has established all of the elements of manslaughter in the first degree with a firearm beyond a reasonable doubt? And I do. The papers filed by the defendant do tend to bring the justification, a justification defense forward, but it isn't here yet. So what the court's looking at really is whether the state could reasonably be found by a jury to have established all the elements of the manslaughter in the first degree with a firearm. And if the jury credited the witnesses and its viewing and concluded that the viewing of the numerous video and still photographs corroborates aspects of the testimony of many of the witnesses, it does seem to the court that the jury could find beyond a reasonable doubt, and reasonably so, that the circumstances attendant to this matter, including the acts of the defendant, did evince an extreme indifference to human life, and that the defendant recklessly engaged in conduct which created a grave risk of death to Mr. Suleiman. And obviously there was evidence and testimony from which the jury could conclude reasonably that the defendant did fire some 7 shots at short range, most of which struck the decedent and thereby caused his death, and that the death was caused by a firearm, and those matters could be found by a reasonable jury beyond any reasonable doubt if they credited the testimony as it came in, and if they chose to believe that the testimony was adequately corroborated by the other exhibits and testimony. So I will deny the motion for judgment of acquittal, and we'll proceed with, I believe it's the defense presentation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do we have anything else to do before that?
No, Your Honor. All I'm going to do while if we have this moment is I'm going to approach the clerk. I do have a clip of a piece of evidence already in the record, but I'm going to have it marked so that I don't have to burden the clerk during the presentation of evidence.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So then are we?
We're ready. Yep.
For the jury. Okay. And Mr. Clerk, are you ready?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can we get the jury? Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
As you will recall, the state has rested, and it is now the time when, if it chooses to do so, the defense may present the case. Mr. Riccio,
Yes, Your Honor, may I begin my presentation?
you may.
Thank you. Your Honor, the defense calls Trooper Brian North.
May you please raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or solemnly sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that the evidence you should give concerning this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury? I do. May you please state your first and last name for the record?
Brian North, North.
May you please state your badge number and business address for the record?
450 and 1111 Country Club Road in Middletown.
Thank you, sir.
Please be seated and move toward the microphone, sir.
May I inquire?
You may.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know your name is Brian North, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to call you Brian throughout. How old are you, Brian?
I'm 33.
And where are you from originally?
I'm from Connecticut.
Okay. Born in Connecticut,
Yes.
raised in Connecticut.
Yes.
Describe your family makeup. Are you married or are you not?
I'm currently married. We don't have any children at this time.
Briefly describe your educational history.
I have a bachelor degree in philosophy from the University of Connecticut.
All right. And in what year did you obtain that degree?
I graduated in 2012.
All right. What was your career path right out of college?
I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do right out of college. I had some odds and end jobs. I had a job as a land surveyor for a time, carpentry, and then eventually I found myself in loss prevention at Sears, followed by Lowe's loss prevention, and I left from there and became a member of the state police.
All right. What made you want to be a police officer?
I wanted to have a career path that I felt had some sort of meaning, where it's more than just a job, and it would give me the opportunity to help people, to make a difference in the world, to have a positive impact.
So when was it that you first applied to be a police officer?
I applied for the state police, I believe it was in 2014.
And explain, if you can, what the process is that you had to undergo to become a police officer.
So the state has an application window for applying. It's a 2 to 4 week window. Once you apply, you're set up with a written exam date. If you pass the written exam, you move on to a physical exam. If you pass that, you go to a background check, a polygraph exam, a psychological exam, and then a medical exam.
Okay. And specific to you, did you pass all those exams?
Yes, I did.
Now, as a person is a member of the department, do they have to go for yearly checkups?
Yearly checkups.
Yearly, like physicals and whatnot?
No, you only have to pass the PT test when you apply and are in the academy.
So once you were hired by the department, what comes after that?
So after you're hired by the department, you begin a 6-month training academy where you learn to become a police officer.
All right. And what types of classes do they teach in the academy?
It's basic police level courses. So motor vehicle law, search and seizure, motor vehicle accidents, patrol, anything of that function.
Okay. So when were you in the academy?
I was in the academy from June to December of 2015.
Okay. And did you take any classes or do any study in addition to what the academy provided?
Yes, after I graduated the academy, there are courses that are offered through the department and through post. I would regularly apply to these classes.
Okay. And what types of classes are you talking about?
I was a variety of classes from crisis intervention training, interview and interrogation, class on use of force policy, class on police response to ambush, things of that nature. There were multiple. I don't remember all of them.
Okay. As part of the training through the academy and beyond, did you also, or were you also educated in areas such as use of force, liability, use of felony car stops, things like that?
Yes.
Okay. And there's been testimony about certain policies that this trial has presented. You were familiar with those policies that you heard of in this trial?
Yes.
Okay. Those policies included what? What policies was it? Have been mentioned in this trial?
We've mentioned use of force policy, body worn camera policy, pursuit policy.
Now, how long have you been a Connecticut State Police officer?
I will be at 9 years in June
Of this year.
of this year. Yes.
And through what troop do you work?
Troop G.
Give well, what area does Troop G geographically cover?
Troop G covers the southwestern corner of Connecticut along the highway.
So is that where geographically, just so the jury has an understanding, where does it start? Because I know I-95 runs sort of west to east.
Yes. So for I-95, Troop G covers from the New York border all the way up to the Branford-Guilford line around exit 56, 57. It also covers Route 15 from the New York border to the Sikorsky Bridge, as well as portions of Route 7, Route 25, and Route 8 up to exit 11, as well as all state buildings in that area.
All right. In addition to the training that you've already testified about, did you receive any additional training in, say, the last quarter of 2019 that the Connecticut State Police provided?
Yes.
And explain that, please.
In October of 2019, I was selected as a new operator on the State Police Tactical Unit. And in November and December, I attended a 1-week new operator training program in each month, respectively.
Now, you mentioned the tactical unit. It sounds like additional training is provided for those individuals, those members of that team, correct?
Correct.
How many hours of training would you say you received in the last quarter of 2019 as a member of that unit?
It was approximately 100 hours, maybe a little more. It was 2 week-long trainings, as well as 2 days of training in November and 2 days of training in December.
So approximately 100 hours in the last quarter of 2019.
Correct.
And among the training that you received, did you receive training that dealt with the proficiency in use of firearms?
Yes.
So, sir, around the 2019-2020 timeframe, and specifically the timeframe that brings us here today, what were your duties for the Connecticut State Police?
I was a patrol trooper assigned to Troop G in Bridgeport, as well as a new operator on the State Police Tactical Unit, not with full capacity yet.
Okay. And as you're in the form, your capacity rather as a trooper, around January of 2020, what was the shift that you were working as a trooper?
I worked evening shift.
All right. And on the night in question, January 15th, 2020, were you working the night shift?
Evening shift,
The
yes.
evening shift. And what specifically is the time frame on the evening shift?
It's from 2 p.m. to around 11 p.m.
So now what I'm going to do, sir, is I'm going to shift your attention to January 15th, 2020, the event that brings us to this case. You noted you were working the evening shift. Explain how you were uniformed that day.
So I was wearing the Class B winter uniform, which consists of black pants with a blue and gold stripe along the side, a gray long sleeve shirt with state police patches on either armband, a state police shield or badge over the left breast pocket, and a name tag over the right breast pocket, as well as a blue tie.
What was your duty weapon that you had at the time?
It was Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0.
And this is a weapon that the Connecticut State Police issued to you, correct?
Correct.
And the training that you just spoke of recently, in a couple questions ago, in the last quarter of 2019, was that weapon one of the weapons used in your training?
Yes.
What type of vehicle did you have on January 15th, 2020 in your capacity as a police officer?
I had a 2016, I believe it was, Ford Taurus Police Interceptor.
Okay. And was it, how was it labeled as a state police vehicle? And to say it differently, how is it recognizable as a police car?
So Connecticut State Police vehicles they don't have markings on it. They're just generally gray or silver vehicles. And there was a light rack on the roof, and on the light rack at the front and back, it says state police on it.
Okay. And the emergency lights on the car, were they functional that day?
Yes.
Was the siren functional that day?
Yes.
As part of the uniform that you just described, is there also a body-worn camera?
Yes.
And you were wearing it that day?
I was.
And it was functional?
It was.
Right. Explain to the jury for a moment how the body-worn camera operates. How is it that it turns on and turns off?
So body-worn camera is linked to the emergency lights on the vehicle. So once you activate your emergency lights, it also activates your body-worn camera.
All right. And we've also heard testimony about the camera that's in the police cars, MVRs.
Yes.
How do they generally operate?
In a similar fashion to the body-worn camera, once the emergency lights are turned on, it will also turn on the MVR. In addition to that, you can also manually activate the cameras by hitting a button on them.
All right. And on this particular day, you were working the evening shift. What was the patrol number? Did the patrols have certain names or numbers?
Yes, I was assigned to Patrol 7 that evening.
Okay. And what towns does that cover?
So it covers from Milford through Orange, West Haven up to New Haven, along I-95 from exits 39 to 47.
All right. And I'm now going to focus your attention to around 4:30, 4:45 on January 15th. Prior to the commencement of this episode that we're talking about today, where were you stationed? Where was your car parked?
I was parked off exit 40 in the DOT parking lot.
Okay. And in your car, you have, among other things, a radio, correct?
Correct.
And that radio is used by state troopers to listen to dispatch back at Troop G,
Yes.
right? Can I ask Attorney Slit if you can play 703? So I'm going to play a recording and ask if you recall hearing this recording in your car at the time that I mentioned.
This is from State 7.
From State 7, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
703.
Welcome to Roy. Can you get on North Palm, correct? Right, 1423, copy that. Oh, no one's breaking it off. So he advised one of his arms with a knife. I wanted to threaten one. I'm a drug disregard break off.
Copy. Written off.
Sir, did you hear that recording in your vehicle?
I did.
Okay, and did you hear in that recording that, You heard what the recording was, right?
Yes.
Suspect armed with a knife.
Yes.
Sir, may I ask? Play 724, please. I'm going to play a second recording. Ask if you recall hearing it in your car while you were sitting in it prior to the pursuit beginning.
Okay, there's actually a scene I get across from Norwalk.
Yes.
The officer that's on the highway or near the vehicle, let them know our officer is telling us to consider it a felony stop. They're considered a carjacking now.
I will say.
Sure.
Okay, we'll pass it on.
Sir, did you hear that recording in your car?
No, that was a phone call between Norwalk and Troop G, so I wouldn't have heard that.
Okay. Can you play 728, please? I'll ask if you heard this recording.
1422-869. Just over call from Norwalk PD. The officers that are investigating are stating that this is now a carjacking incident. Just use caution. The individual did have a knife. Approaching 26, everyone.
Did you hear that recording, sir?
Yes, I did.
Now, you had testified that you were at exit 40 in the DOT parking lot, correct?
Correct.
What did you do next?
I continued to listen, and I know I looked on my MDT, my laptop, to see the location of Trooper Jackson and I think it was Trooper Dalling. They were parked at the 27 northbound entrance ramp, and I continued to watch where they are and listen for further updates.
All right. And was there anything unusual about the fact that there was pursuit of a stolen motor vehicle in Norwalk?
So initially, yes, when the pursuit was first broadcast, it came out just as Norwalk being in pursuit of a stolen motor vehicle, if I remember correctly. And I thought that was strange because our pursuit policy had recently changed several months prior, prohibiting pursuits of stolen motor vehicles.
And do you remember when that policy had changed?
I think it was within 6 months of the incident. It was relatively recent at that point.
All right. Now, you heard the broadcast mention a carjacking. Is that a felony in the state of Connecticut?
Yes.
And you testified about your knowledge of the pursuit policy. These changes in the policy, you obtained these changes as part of your training, correct?
Correct.
And to say it differently, Connecticut State Police educates troopers about what the changes are in policy?
Correct.
Policy through the administrative rules are just that, right, sir? Just policy?
Objection leading.
How, you know what the administrative rules are through the Connecticut State Police, correct?
Correct.
Matter of fact, from cover to cover, how long are the rules and regulations for the Connecticut State Police?
I don't know the exact number of pages, but it's well over 1,000. I think it would, if you printed it all out, it would probably fill a 5-inch binder.
And the word policies are used. Are they interpreted as hard and fast rules or just policies?
They're policies. They're to be used as guidelines. So obviously you can't plan for every single situation you encounter.
So getting back, sir, to your actions, you please explain. You just mentioned a conversation inquiring about why there's a pursuit, but what did you do next?
Once the pursuit passed 27, or I'm sorry, it wasn't a pursuit at that time. So once the vehicle had passed 27 where the troopers were waiting for it, and I got an update that it continued past them to approaching 28 without them having picked up the vehicle, that was when I got on I-95 southbound and began heading south.
All right. How are you obtaining information of what this white Hyundai Sonata was doing?
I was listening to the radio. Dispatch was broadcasting updates.
All right, and this dispatch is coming from Troop G, correct?
Correct.
Troop G is providing information regarding the car's whereabouts?
Check
Yes.
the reading.
Apologies.
Sustained.
And where does Troop G, what's the source of the dispatch? Where is it coming from?
It's coming from Troop G in Bridgeport at the dispatch center.
Okay. Now, were you able to also monitor where the other troopers were?
Yes.
Explain how you could do that.
So on the MDT, the laptop that's mounted in the vehicle, you can click on troopers' locations or click on a trooper and it will bring up their GPS location on the map. So you could see in relatively real time, there is a slight delay where that trooper is.
Okay. So you can monitor, again, generally where they are, correct?
Correct.
And your radio is able to provide you an idea of where the suspect vehicle is.
Correct. By listening to the updates from dispatch.
All right. And what was dispatch informing you about the way that this vehicle was operating?
They were informing me that I was driving erratically.
Did it explain and how do you come to that conclusion that there was erratic operation?
I don't remember the exact transmission, but I knew along the entirety of them following it, there were various reports of it driving at a high rate of speed, reportedly striking vehicles, and then just the speed at which they were giving updates of the exits it was passing. It was evident that it was traveling at a high rate of speed.
Do you recall what time of day this took place
It was just before 5 p.m.
and what day of the week it was?
It was a Wednesday.
And what highway was this taking place on?
I-95 northbound.
And are you familiar with I-95?
I am.
And specifically, are you familiar with I-95, say, from Bridgeport to New Haven?
Yes.
Heavily traveled road?
Yes.
What further information did you obtain as you're now driving southbound on I-95?
So I was listening to the updates of the vehicle's location, and I believe it was in the exit 33 area when I decided that I would flip around at exit 35 and station myself on the northbound entrance ramp and to get ahead of the vehicle.
Now, sir, just to take you back again, after hearing the broadcast regarding that this was being reported as a carjacking, suspect had a knife, how did that change the situation in your mind?
Well, I knew that a pursuit would now be authorized because it had changed from just being a stolen motor vehicle to a violent crime being committed in the form of a carjacking with the report of a knife.
Did you also consider the information you were receiving from Troop G regarding the operation of that white Hyundai Sonata?
That's also a consideration. One of the reasons for breaking off pursuits is a danger to the public. So if a vehicle is continuing to operate erratically after pursuit has been broken off for a length of time, it's continuing to be a danger to the motoring public.
And a motor vehicle moving at a high rate of speed can be considered dangerous?
Yes.
So you're still traveling southbound. What did you do next?
I flipped at exit 35. So I got off the southbound 35 off ramp and then got back on the 35 northbound entrance ramp.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to play a portion of States 8. This is the mobile video recorder of Trooper North. It's already in evidence. I have reduced it to a shorter clip, which I'm going to mark as defense 2. Defense B, if I can approach the clerk.
Okay, so that's marked. Any objections to this?
This is a portion of the MVR of Mr. North.
Correct.
Okay, no objection.
Okay, so that can be a full exhibit.
That's defense B.
B.
Attorney Slick, you just stop for a moment? Sir, I'm going to show you what's been previously entered into evidence as your mobile video recorder from your motor vehicle. And just so the jury understands, what am I referring to when I make that reference?
It's the dash camera footage from the inside the cruiser.
Okay, this is mounted so it can look out your front windshield, correct?
Correct. It's at the top of the windshield, just to the right of the rear view mirror.
Okay. Now, you testified that you had gone from southbound to northbound, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to show you a video which is now defense B, a portion of State's 8, which is from when you just entered I-95 North. I'll ask you to watch it. I'll stop there at a couple points, okay?
Okay.
If you would, thank you. Now, sir, as this clip is playing, what speed are you driving at this point?
I'm traveling around 40 miles an hour.
All right, and what are you attempting to do at this point?
At this point, I had just received a dispatch that the white Hyundai was coming up behind me, so I'm looking in my rearview mirror to observe the vehicle.
All right, and what steps were you trying to achieve at this point other than trying to watch him?
So once I saw the vehicle, I attempted to position my cruiser in front of him and turn on my emergency lights in hopes that the vehicle would slow down and I could initiate a traffic stop.
We'll stop for a moment, please. Sir, we are at about a minute and a half into this recording, and I see a white vehicle in the center of the screen. Is that the vehicle you're making reference to?
Yes.
What kind of vehicle was it?
It was a white Hyundai Sonata.
All right. And as you just testified, you were trying to slow the Hyundai Sonata as he was behind you, correct?
Correct.
And now the car is in front of you, correct?
Correct.
So were you successful in slowing the vehicle?
No, it passed me in the right lane.
All right. Continue, please. At this point, your lights and sirens are activated, correct?
Correct.
Objection leading, Your Honor. Move to strike.
Mr. Dane, if you could rephrase it, Mr.
I shall. And you can play it. Is your car, what is your police car doing at this point?
I'm following the vehicle with my emergency lights and siren on.
Okay. What town are we in at this point in this video?
We should still be in Milford at this point.
And the white Hyundai Sonata, what is it doing now?
Currently, it's driving down the right shoulder, passing multiple vehicles at a high rate of speed.
And how fast was this Hyundai Sonata traveling from what you could observe?
I don't know at this exact moment, but I know it's alternating speeds between 80 to 100 miles per hour.
As the video continues, does the white Hyundai Sonata continue to, what lanes of traffic does the Sonata continue to use?
At this point, it's just in the left lane.
What is it doing now?
It switched over to the center lane and it slowed down because there was a vehicle in front of it. So at this point, I positioned my cruiser in front.
All right. And what was your intention?
Trooper Jackson was also in the pursuit at that time, so we were attempting to box the vehicle in.
And I apologize, I was speaking as you were answering the question. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Trooper Jackson had also joined the pursuit at this point, so we were attempting to box the vehicle in, slowing it down.
All right. And what did the video show as to your success or lack of success in doing that?
We were unsuccessful.
All right. Attorney Slip, please. We now see what do we now see in the video?
So that's Trooper Jackson's cruiser passing me after the collision.
Okay. Can you testify right now as to what or how this Hyundai Sonata was driving?
So it's continuing to drive at a very high rate of speed, driving erratically while being pursued by at least two police vehicles at this point.
What do you observe now as far as the motions and movement of the Hyundai Sonata?
So the vehicle is jerking back and forth, and as it's shifting from lane to lane rapidly.
What's the law regarding when a police officer is requesting for motorists to pull over? What's the law? What is the motorist supposed to do?
You're required to slow your vehicle and pull over on the right shoulder.
And did the operator of the Hyundai Sonata do that?
No.
At this point, as this video continues, had you been able to identify who was in this Hyundai Sonata?
No.
Were you able to determine number of occupants?
No.
What is the Sonata doing now?
It's currently driving down the median.
And what were the speeds at this point? And what town are we in now?
I believe we're in West Haven at this point.
All right. And through your recollection, what were the speeds in this area that the Sonata was driving?
It continued to maintain between 80 to 100 miles per hour.
And during this period of time, Brian, were you maintaining communication with Troop G?
I was, because at this point I was the second vehicle in the pursuit.
Okay. And what are the requirements of the second vehicle in a pursuit?
So the second vehicle is to take over radio communications and relay all pertinent information back to dispatch.
All right. And so what information were you sending back to Troop G?
It's traffic conditions, weather conditions, lane of travel, location, speeds.
Now, sir, at this point, this pursuit has now been ongoing for a number of minutes, fair to say?
Correct.
And has the Sonata slowed in any way or otherwise pulled over?
No.
Were you also maintaining communication with Trooper Jackson?
So I'm not talking to Trooper Jackson. I'm giving all information to Troop G, but Trooper Jackson is listening via his radio.
We've now hit the exit 43 off ramp. Can you explain what the Sonata is doing?
So it's passing the vehicles that are in the left side of that lane and taking a left-hand turn onto Campbell Ave at a red light.
Okay. And explain what you just did with your car.
So I pulled to the left side of Jackson's cruiser and positioned my cruiser diagonally in front of Jackson's, up with my hood up towards that black SUV in an attempt to contain the white Hyundai Sonata.
And to that point, explain that a little more. Why were you attempting to try to contain it?
Because up until that point, the driver of the white Honda Sonata had made every attempt to escape, including ramming both of our cruisers while we attempted to box them in on the highway. So I wanted to cut off a potential avenue of escape at that location as well.
So now at the moment where you're underneath the overpass, what information did you process as to what the operator of this motor vehicle had done? Like, what did you know about the operator of the motor vehicle to that point? This is before you're coming out of your car.
I knew he had just struck the civilian vehicle in the form of that black SUV.
All right. And that's in addition to the other information from Troop G dispatch, correct?
Correct. The previous reports of this incident starting as a carjacking with a knife.
And everything that just happened on the highway that we just saw,
Correct.
including we saw a video, a portion of the video where you described trying to box in the operator of the Sonata. Obviously, well, did he collide with your motor vehicle in this attempt?
He did. As we were trying to box him in on the highway, he rammed the rear driver's side of my cruiser and the passenger side of Jackson's cruiser.
Okay. Leading damage?
Yes.
All right. You testified just a moment ago about a civilian motorist underneath the highway. What did you observe about that civilian motorist in the dark colored vehicle?
I saw that the vehicle was stopped.
Okay. And what did the Sonata do as far as the trailblazer, the civilian motorist is concerned?
So it was not driving at a high rate of speed at that point. So Jackson was I was assuming slowing down for traffic because that civilian vehicle was stopped. And at that point, Jackson drove his cruiser up alongside the driver's side of the Hyundai Sonata in an attempt to contain him, to box him in. And I saw at that point the white Honda Sonata collided with the rear of the Chevy Trailblazer and also struck Jackson's cruiser.
The best you know, what was the speed that the Sonata hit the Trailblazer at?
I would estimate it was traveling around 15 miles per hour, but I don't know the exact speed.
And how would you characterize that as far as impact? High, low, medium? What would you characterize it as?
Low to medium impact. There wasn't airbag deployment.
All right. So at this point, the car is now come off the highway, and I failed to ask you this. What did you observe as the car was exiting exit 43? What did you observe as far as the traffic on 95 ahead of everyone?
On the highway proper, just past exit 43, it becomes very heavy traffic, as it does that time of day in rush hour traffic as you get closer to the New Haven area.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so due to the heavy traffic, this pursuit now goes onto the off-ramp, correct?
It appeared that way, yes.
And onto Candle Avenue, correct?
Correct.
Objection leading.
Sustained. Strike.
We've seen the video up to the point where you've parked your car. What did you do next once you parked your vehicle?
At that point, I put my vehicle in park and got out of my vehicle and drew my pistol and proceeded towards the rear of my cruiser.
All right. Why did you draw your pistol?
Because we were doing a felony stop. That's procedure on felony stops, as well as the report of the driver of the Hyundai Sonata being armed with a knife.
All right. What did you do next?
At that point, I looked over and I saw Trooper Jackson standing at the driver door of the Hyundai Sonata, yelling to the operator of the vehicle to get out of the car, get out of the car. I saw Jackson then move quickly around the front of the Hyundai Sonata over to the passenger side. So I took his position at the driver door and observed the driver of the vehicle.
All right. So what were you doing with your weapon at that point?
We both had lethal cover on the operator. We're doing a felony stop and we're trying to contain any possible threat from emerging because it was reportedly he was armed with a knife.
So please explain what you observed. You're now on the driver's side, as you just testified. Please explain what you observed.
So I activated my flashlight so I could see inside the vehicle. I saw the operator of the vehicle. He had his eyes closed and he was leaning back on the chair with the seat slightly reclined, and his head was on the headrest and his hands were on his lap.
Did he have on a seatbelt?
No, he did not.
So was he responsive?
No, he was completely unresponsive.
And what impression did this leave you by seeing him in that state?
So he appeared to be unconscious or passed out. I've working at Troop G on the highway. I've gone to countless accidents, and a collision at that speed would not be conducive with an operator losing consciousness. So I was thinking at that point that he was either having some type of medical issue or possibly a drug-related issue.
You also, so where exactly was your line of sight at this time?
So I was going back and forth between looking at the operator of the vehicle's hands and eyes, just continuing to monitor for any change in what the driver of the vehicle was doing.
What portion of the car were you actually looking through?
I was looking through the driver door window.
As opposed to the windshield?
Correct.
And why the driver's door window versus anything else?
So because of the angle of a windshield, it's harder to see, especially to see clearly through it, especially with your flashlight on when it's in darker conditions. Whereas being more square on with the driver window, it's flatter to you, so it's much easier to see inside the vehicle.
All right. Are you also so you're watching Mr. Suleiman at this point, correct?
Correct.
What else are you watching?
I'm also looking at what Trooper Jackson is doing on the other side of the vehicle. At that point, I saw a West Haven officer also run over to the vehicle and stand next to Trooper Jackson.
Did you know who that officer was?
No, I had no idea.
And what did you do next?
I continued to monitor the driver of the vehicle. At some point, I heard banging, and I looked over and saw what appeared to be the West Haven officer striking the window with what I thought was a baton. At that point, I instructed Trooper Jackson to go to taser.
And can you explain why that was?
Yes, so it is procedure in a scenario like that. At that time, the operator of the vehicle did not have any weapons drawn, and he wasn't being an active threat. But that doesn't mean he can't rapidly escalate the situation. So since I was maintaining lethal cover, I instructed Trooper Jackson to go to taser in the event that the operator of the vehicle began to escalate to a point where that would be necessary.
And how was it that you communicated that to Trooper Jackson?
So I yelled out Jackson's name and told him to go to taser. I saw that he looked up at me. So at that point, I took my left hand and I patted the taser on my duty belt.
All right. If I could just take a moment, you talked about sort of verbal communications here. Explain the sort of the volume and the scene as you found yourself at this point.
So it was extremely loud. We're under the overpass of I-95 during rush hour traffic. So obviously it's very loud with highway traffic above. There's also my siren going, and I believe Trooper Jackson's siren in his cruiser was still activated as well.
So getting back to Trooper Jackson, after you communicated the go to taser, what then happens after that?
He holstered his firearm and he drew his taser.
All right. And what is that called when a person or an officer goes to taser?
It's non-lethal cover.
Now, you testified about a West Haven officer. Did you know who that West Haven officer was?
No.
Were you giving him any commands to do anything?
No.
As far as you know, was Trooper Jackson giving him any commands to do anything?
Not that I could hear. I also couldn't hear any conversations going on the passenger side of the vehicle.
And how quickly was this whole situation developing?
Very rapidly.
So after he goes to taser, what happens next?
A short time after him transitioning to taser, the window shatters from being struck by the baton. At that point, the operator of the vehicle seemingly comes to.
Through your training experience, why was that window being broken?
So There are multiple reasons to break a window. Given the situation, we needed to effect the arrest of that individual. The doors were locked, so you can't just open the door normally, which would be ideal. You would, in that essence, if they're not complying, have to break the window to get access into the interior of the vehicle, to extricate the person inside the vehicle, or do anything to begin that process. There's also the additional need of someone who's seemingly unconscious inside a vehicle to get in that vehicle quickly, and that primarily involves breaking a window if a vehicle's doors are locked to get access to that person.
From your perspective, you were able to, what were you able to see? Explain again who you were able to see on the passenger side of that vehicle.
So I saw Jackson standing, it was basically adjacent to the A pillar of the vehicle. So that would be the part where the windshield and the door frame meet. And the West Haven officer was just at his left-hand side, and he was the one who broke the window, and he was right at the window.
So please explain further from your perspective the proximity of these two officers to the passenger door.
Jackson looked like he was within a foot or two, and it was tough to tell with the West Haven officer because he looked like he was almost in physical contact with the vehicle at that point.
And this, again, is from your point of view, from where you're standing.
Correct.
All right. After the West Haven officer breaks the window, what happens next?
Once the window is broken, the operator of the vehicle, it seems like he wakes up, he comes to, his eyes shoot wide open, and he begins looking around. His hand then immediately shoots down to his right pants pocket, and he began reaching rapidly as if to pull something out.
Were you able to specifically see that motion?
Yes.
All right. Could you stand and show the jury the motion that you observed?
So his eyes were closed as he was leaning back, and he opens them, begins looking around, and it's just like tugging in his pocket quickly back and forth.
Thank you. What did you observe as far as clothing that Mr. Suleiman was wearing?
I saw he was wearing a thick winter jacket.
All right. And again, notwithstanding the clothing, you were able to see the actions that you just described?
Yes,
Did you still maintain lethal cover?
I did.
And why was that?
Well, one, as I said before, we were doing a felony stop, and two, now it appears that Mr. Suleiman is actively trying to produce something from his pocket.
And this consideration is based upon the information that you had previously obtained from Troop G.
Correct, with the report of a weapon.
All right. So please explain, once the window's broken, what Mr. Suleiman then did.
So he pulls out a silver colored object, which appeared to be a knife. He then brings it up and holds it in front of him in a closed fist with the edge portion facing forward and the tip facing up. He then turns over towards his right, and I see him make eye contact with the passenger side of the vehicle where Trooper Jackson and the West Haven officer are positioned. And I know through my training and experience that's called target glancing.
All right. So specifically, can you explain sort of the movements that you saw Mr. Suleiman then take?
He shifted his upper body, and he had the knife where it was almost, you could call it coiled back. I could compare that to someone about to throw a punch, how their fist is back, where it's close to your body as opposed to being outstretched.
Right. And in what direction was Mr. Suleiman advancing towards, or moving towards, or turning towards?
He was turning towards the passenger side of the vehicle where the West Haven officer and Trooper Jackson were.
Now, at this moment in time, if we could just consider this moment in time, what was the status of the window?
It was open.
And why was it open?
Because the West Haven officer had just shattered the window.
And what did you perceive, or what did you see as far as Trooper Jackson and Officer Rappa?
For a moment, I took my eyes off the operator of the vehicle to look over at what they were doing. And I saw Trooper Jackson moving towards the open window with his taser out, and I could not see the West Haven officer at all, which appeared to me that he had begun moving into the vehicle to begin the extrication process.
And can you explain that a little further? How did you interpret that? What was your thought process about why you couldn't see him? What did you think?
I assumed I couldn't see him because his head had ducked below the roofline of the vehicle in attempts to now either stick his head or his entire upper body into the vehicle at that point. Obviously, if the door is locked, we're not opening it from the outside. So if he's going to get that door open, he's going to have to reach inside to an unknown vehicle that's not his to find the door handle. But obviously, I don't know what's going through his head at that moment on where he's trying to go.
So tell us now about your field of vision and your where is your field of vision at this point?
I had tunnel vision at that point. I was highly focused on the threat that the operator of the vehicle had just introduced in the form of the knife and his posturing at that point.
Explain what you were feeling at this point.
At that point, I had it's almost like an oh my God feeling. This is happening while the West Haven officer I'm thinking is in the window because I can't see him. And I was afraid that he was going to be stabbed in the face or the neck, which is obviously can be a fatal injury.
What were you personally feeling?
I felt that I had to act in that moment, or the West Haven officer, even potentially Trooper Jackson, could have been killed.
Now, you testified that Mr. Suleiman started to turn to the right.
Objection leading.
Pardon me, my apologies. Please explain again. Thank you. I'm usually cross-examining. Please explain again the movement of Mr. Suleiman immediately before you discharge your weapon.
Immediately before I discharged my weapon, he was turning towards the right, towards the passenger side of the vehicle on the open window.
And was Mr. Suleiman within the wingspan of both officers?
Yes, in a vehicle that size, a Hyundai Sonata, an adult male is typically able to just extend their right arm and touch the passenger side door or window. So if you add leaning into that in the driver's seat and the additional length of the knife that was in his hand, he's well within reach of the officers.
You discussed the car just briefly there. How would you discuss that car as far as size?
It's just a small car, not like a large SUV or something to that nature where I wouldn't consider it compact like a smart car. It would just be an average size sedan.
So with the motions that Mr. Suleiman was just taking, as you discussed, the wingspan, as you discussed, what about your training and experience caused you to come to your next thought process?
Well, he had introduced a knife and was rapidly escalating the situation to a lethal force encounter. And I was in fear for the life of the West Haven officer who I perceived to be entering the vehicle at that point.
At this point, did you fire your weapon?
At that point, yes, I made the decision to fire my weapon.
And again, why?
To protect the life of the West Haven officer and potentially Trooper Jackson as well.
At this moment, were you in fear of your own safety?
At that moment, I wasn't thinking about my safety. No, I was just concerned with them.
Did you believe, based upon your training experience, that firing your weapon was
Objection
reasonable?
leading.
It is leading. You've been trained in the use of force, correct, sir?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, may I approach the clerk for a moment?
You may.
Sir, I'm retrieved what's been previously marked as Stage 41. This is the policy for the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. All right? This is in evidence. And, sir, what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach you, I'm going to hand you this document, and I'm going to ask you to read a couple things from it, please, okay?
Okay.
Do you read number 1?
All legitimate uses of force in a law enforcement or custodial setting are ultimately justified by an articulable need to exert some level of control over another person.
Read number 2.
It is the subject's actions which dictate the quality and quantity of force used by an officer in response thereto in order to exert control.
Number 3.
The need to exert control over another person in a law enforcement or custodial setting is often characterized by rapid and unpredictable changes, requiring the officer to continually reassess a subject's actions as well as his or her response to those actions.
I'll retrieve that from you. Sir, according to policy and your training experience, were you aware of the existence of these policies?
Yes, I was.
Now, let me bring you back, sir. What did you do immediately after you fired your firearm?
Immediately after I fired my firearm, I broadcast shots fired and began to reassess the operator of that vehicle.
All right. What happens next?
I'm looking in the vehicle. It's tough to see because the glass is shattered at this point, but there was a hole in the shattered glass that I was able to peer through. So I was looking at the operator's hands, and I saw that he was still moving and he still had a knife in his hands. So at that point, I yelled out something to the effect of, "He's got a knife, drop the knife, drop the knife."
At this point, explain, and you started to do so, where you were looking and how you were looking.
So because it was a small hole that I'm looking through in the glass, I physically had to squat down so I could look back and forth to change the plane my eyes were on so I could see through the hole, so I could look at the operator's hands as well as his eyes, and then just go back and forth between the two, because his hands are obviously a threat, especially at that point having a knife in them, and his eyes would indicate what, or at least give hints towards what his next actions would be if he's looking at something, target glancing again.
And at this point, where exactly did Mr. Suleiman have the knife?
He had it in his right hand, in his fist, closed fist.
The same hand that he held it in previously?
Correct.
What happens next after you see the knife?
At some point, he ends up dropping the knife. I say something, I believe, along the lines of, it's out of his hands, it's on his lap. Once I see that, I decided to make the decision to punch out the shattered glass using my pistol so I could reach in quickly and retrieve the knife, which subsequently I did. I grabbed the knife from his lap and placed it on the hood of the vehicle. And then I immediately alerted the other officers on scene that I had the knife, it was on the hood, and to pull him out of the vehicle.
Prior to Mr. Suleiman being removed from the vehicle, did you explain sort of the cover, the type of cover you maintained?
I continue to maintain lethal force. One, because he did still have the knife in his hand at that point. But then even after I removed the knife, we had reports of a knife. So that was the weapon you could say we knew about. One, we had reports of it. Two, I had visually observed it. But that doesn't mean there's not an additional weapon that he's carrying. In fact, in our training in the academy, when we're searching someone, if you find one one weapon on a person, you're trained to immediately begin your pat down of said person or search of said person again, because they say where there's one, there's more.
How soon after you discharged your weapon was Mr. Suleiman being removed from the Sonata?
I don't remember how much time had passed between the two. It felt like it was a relatively short period of time.
So please continue. What happens next?
So at some point, one of the officers or troopers on the other side of the vehicle reaches in the vehicle and begins to pull Mr. Suleiman out of the vehicle so we could begin rendering first aid.
Did you participate in Mr. Suleiman's removal?
No, I did not. At that point, I made the decision to go around to the passenger side of the vehicle, though, as they were pulling him out.
All right. What happened with this Hyundai Sonata once Mr. Suleiman was removed from the vehicle?
As he was being removed from the vehicle began to roll forward.
Now, do you have any recollection about whether the car, what was the status of the car? Was it on or off during this episode?
It was on. He never made any conscious effort to shut the vehicle off, to my knowledge.
And when the car rolled forward, what happened to that car?
It ends up striking the black Chevy Trailblazer an additional time, and I believe a West Haven officer jumped in the vehicle to put it in park.
Once on the passenger side, sir, what did you see or do next?
When I got to the passenger side of the vehicle, I saw that Mr. Suleiman was now removed from the vehicle and I don't believe he was on the sidewalk. I think it was on the road right in front of the sidewalk, and a West Haven officer had begun life-saving measures.
All right. So please explain that. What did you observe in this attempt to render aid?
So someone had brought some type of first aid equipment over to one of the West Haven officers who had taken over his primary care for Mr. Suleiman, and it looked like packing wounds on his chest with gauze or quick clot, or I'm not 100% sure on that.
All right. And what did you do? Did you make attempts to render first aid?
So at some point, someone yelled for a first aid kit. So I immediately went to the rear of my cruiser and opened up the trunk, and I pulled out my blue state police issued first aid bag. I immediately returned over to Mr. Suleiman and put the bag down next to him and began opening the bag and going through it. I don't remember how much time passed, but a short time later, the West Haven officer that was rendering first aid reported that he lost his pulse. So he began administering CPR. So at that point, I pulled out my bag valve mask from my first aid bag, and I began assisting the West Haven officer in administering CPR in the form of doing rescue breathing.
Can you explain for the jury what a bag valve mask is and how is it used?
So a bag valve mask, it covers the nose and mouth and creates a seal, and attached to it it's like a reservoir that fills up with air. So when you squeeze the reservoir, it pumps air into your patient's lungs. So you're in essence breathing for them, which is necessary during CPR.
And you did that?
Yes.
Okay. And at this time, how many officers are now on scene?
I'm not sure because I'm rendering CPR. So I'm only focused on Mr. Suleiman at this point and the West Haven officer who I'm performing CPR with. Everything else is just a blur outside of that.
So continue. What further efforts did you make in an effort to provide first aid?
I continue with rescue breathing. We did several rounds of CPR. I'm not sure how many rounds it was. At some point, a someone arrived on scene and asked if I was the one that had discharged their firearm. And when I told them that yes, I had, they told me to basically stop doing CPR and have, I think it was Trooper Jackson, replace me for breathing for Mr. Suleiman.
All right. At this point, what did you do?
I walked over with I think it was Trooper Richter, who had pulled me off of the scene, and we walked back over towards I think his cruiser.
Your Honor, this might be a good time to take a break.
Okay. We'll break to 12:15.
All right. Court is again in session. You may be seated. Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning, Marshal. Are we ready for the jury?
Yes, Your Honor. May I have Trooper North retake the stand?
I'm sorry. Yeah, oh yeah, sure. Six jurors and two alternates, gentlemen.
Yes, so stipulated. So stipulated.
Thank you.
Mike, can you continue? Thank you.
I inquire.
Good morning again, Trooper North. So we left off at the point where you were rendering first aid and then someone approached you.
Yes.
Okay. What happens next?
I remember being pulled off of CPR and relieved by, I think it was Trooper Jackson, and then walking with the trooper that had pulled me off of CPR over towards his cruiser, I think. I think it was his cruiser. I'm not 100% sure.
All right. So where do you then go at this point?
Just standing over by the cruiser, and at some point, Sergeant Kiley arrives on scene.
All right. And explain, did you interact with Sergeant Kiley?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened? What took place there?
He asked me if I was all right, I think, and he asked for a quick synopsis of what happened.
Now, this is the same Sergeant Kiley that testified earlier in this trial?
Yes.
Okay. And is it the same Sergeant Kiley and the same interaction that we've seen video footage of?
Yes.
So again, what was it that he asked you for?
A quick synopsis of what had happened.
All right. Not an interview, correct?
No.
Objection, leading.
Staying.
Withdrawn.
Rephrase it.
So as you using your words, a quick synopsis.
Correct.
And what was that quick synopsis that you provided?
I don't remember the exact words. I remember asking if he wanted the full story from the pursuit on the highway or just the end, and he told me that he had seen most of the pursuit and just what happened at the end.
All right. And did you tell him what happened?
Yes.
You provided a response.
Yes.
Now, at this point, as video showed, the audio of the body-worn camera turned off.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how or why that happened?
No, I can't know why.
Okay. And matter of fact, did you know at the time, at the scene, that the audio was turned off?
No.
You answered Sergeant Kiley's questions until he stopped asking you questions, correct?
Correct.
Right. What happens after you finished your interaction with Sergeant Kiley?
He had me go to Yale New Haven Hospital.
All right. So let's take a moment and let's talk about what you were feeling. This conversation with Sergeant Kiley was about how long after this incident where you discharged your weapon?
I don't know. It was I think a short time after being pulled off of CPR, but I don't know.
What were you feeling?
I was definitely in shock. I remember my hands were shaking and my heart was beating like crazy.
Explain what you were feeling, like what sensations, what were you feeling?
It was a very strange sensation that I don't exactly know how to explain. It was almost like my entire body was buzzing or vibrating. And it was just like an overwhelming feeling as I was starting to have a realization of what had happened and trying to process the gravity of the situation.
Were you feeling that same sensation, these same feelings while this event was unfolding?
As the event was unfolding initially, it's just a high level of stress, but we do enough training to almost work through that. But right after shots were fired, there's not really any training you could do to mentally prepare yourself for that. And I remember immediately after that happened, it was just a horrible feeling that comes over you because you train for having that possibility because you know that this is a dangerous job, but you never actually think that something like that will ever happen to you, that you'll have to be in a lethal force scenario.
So you've explained that you then went to the hospital. What hospital did you go to?
It was Yale New Haven Hospital.
Right. And who brought you there?
It was Trooper Richter.
And you were who directed you to go to the hospital?
It was Sergeant Kiley.
And how long were you at the hospital for?
It was several hours.
For the several hours that you were at Yale New Haven Hospital, were you still in shock?
Yeah, definitely.
Was your heart still pounding as you described?
Yeah.
Your heart rate was, explain your heart rate.
It was an extremely elevated heart rate. I don't remember what the exact number was, but I know that at this time in my life, it was the fittest I've ever been in training for the State Police Tactical Unit. And my resting heart rate was somewhere from 36 to 38 beats per minute.
Is it fair to say it was not that low at the hospital?
It was definitely not that low at the hospital.
And through those many hours that you were at the hospital, again, the shock still stayed with you.
Correct.
Did it continue to stay with you even after you left the hospital?
Yeah, the feeling of shock starts to subside, but then you're just left with it's tough to describe. It's almost like a mental anguish as you're trying to process an event like that. And that's not something that really goes away. That's something you try and almost contain just so you could move on with your life, but it doesn't go away. I still think about this every day. I lose sleep over it. It's not an easy thing to experience and live with.
Sir, at the time you discharged your pistol, did you know how many times you fired it?
I didn't. We don't really train to count rounds as we're shooting. You just rely back on your training.
So the number is immaterial.
In essence, yes.
Is the number of shots material to your assessment?
We train to fire until you can perceive a change in the threat, which if you're standing, it's easier to ascertain change. An example would be someone falling to the ground, whereas if you're in a seated position, it's much more difficult to ascertain a change in behavior of the threat. It's also tough in this particular scenario because the glass of the window I was looking through shattered, and it made it very difficult to see. So I was just engaging for a very brief period of time in a high stress scenario where you just 100% fall back on your training.
Brian, why 7 shots?
As I just said, I didn't know it was 7 at the time. It's not something that's intentionally done. 7 rounds. It's just falling back to my training.
Now, earlier in this trial, the jury observed photographs of the weapon that you had, Smith & Wesson, is that right?
Yes, it's Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0.
And in that particular weapon, how many bullets does the weapon hold, including the magazine?
So the magazine holds 7 rounds plus the one that's in the chamber.
The magazine holds
17 rounds.
Okay, plus 1 in the chamber?
Correct. So 18 total.
Now, at the conclusion of this event, how many rounds still remain in your pistol?
There were 10 rounds still in my magazine plus the one in the chamber, so 11.
You fired your weapon until what point in time was reached?
Until I determined that the threat was stopped, and at which point I reassessed. And that's when I saw that Mr. Suleiman still had the knife in his hand and was still moving. That was when I issued commands for him to drop the knife.
And the period of time that went by from the first shot to the last shot was how long?
It was extremely brief. I think it was around 1.5 seconds.
You fired your weapon according to the training experience you
Objection
received.
leading.
Pardon me. Withdrawn. Where did you obtain your training and experience with your use of a firearm?
So initially I received training through the Connecticut State Police Training Academy. I don't remember how many days, but it's at least a week of training with firearms in the academy. And then every year you're required to do 2 in-service trainings with your firearm. But then on top of that, being a new operator on the TAC team, I had received additional training with firearm proficiency through the tactical unit.
And early in your testimony, you gave us a description of the number of hours of training you received in the last quarter of 2019. Is that the training you're referring to?
Yes, that's the training I'm referring to.
Was there any ability, withdrawn, what ability, if any, existed to de-escalate the situation?
So there was not any ability to de-escalate the situation because when we, at the beginning of the scene, meaning the felony stop, the operator of the vehicle was unresponsive and seemingly unconscious. So de-escalation implies that you're taking someone from an agitated state and bringing them down to a calmer state so you can't de-escalate below unconscious. As soon as the passenger side window was shattered, the operator of the vehicle chose to rapidly escalate the situation. And at that point, there's no time for de-escalation because he is aggressively and rapidly acting.
And who told the West Haven officer to break that window?
I'm not sure if anyone told him to break the window. I just know that I didn't tell him to break the window and I couldn't hear any communications going on the opposite side of the vehicle.
You testified, sir, that you were in shock. But did you panic during this event?
No, I was definitely highly stressed during the event, but I just fell back and relied on my training and past experiences to handle it.
Were you angry at Mr. Suleiman?
No, not at all.
Were you doing the job that you were trained to do?
I was.
So immediately after this event took place, the days that followed, what happened as far as your job is concerned?
So immediately,
I object, Your Honor. I don't know what the relevance of that is.
You want to come up here for a second?
Thank you. Sir, after this incident took place, were you requested to make a statement,
Yes, I was.
a written statement?
Yes.
Okay. Explain what happened in that process.
So I was given a few days so I could decompress and rationalize what had just happened. Then I was afforded the opportunity to write a written statement after reviewing body-worn camera and MVR footage of the incident.
And after you completed that review, did you write a statement?
Yes.
And was that statement reviewed by an attorney at the time?
Yes, it was.
And then was that statement then provided to law enforcement once it was completed?
Yes.
Sir, in this episode that you've testified to today, do you believe you acted consistent with your training and experience?
Yes, absolutely.
Why is it again you fired your weapon, sir?
I was trying to protect the life of the West Haven officer and Trooper Jackson from the threat of deadly force.
And that's why you acted the way that you did?
Yes.
What impression has this left on you?
Objection? Irrelevant?
Sustained.
Why was it that you became a police officer?
Objection? Asked and answered?
I'll allow it.
As I stated before, I became a police officer because I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to have a career that had meaning outside of just myself. And there were numerous occasions being a police officer that I was able to accomplish that and put smiles on people's faces.
Do you still want to be a police officer?
Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant?
I'll sustain that.
No further questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
No talking, please.
Now, you've described the stop at exit 43 as a felony stop. Is that correct?
Correct.
Repeatedly use that sort of term of art, felony stop?
Correct.
And could we exhibit 46, slide 13, please?
Did you say 46, Mr. Devlin?
46, exhibit 46, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Slide 13, that's the PowerPoint. And I think slide 13 would be. Okay, so it says, felony traffic stops, communication is key. Talk to your partner to formulate a plan of action. That says,
Yes.
it says, do not approach the car, exclamation point, correct?
Correct.
And eventually, you'll order the subject out of the vehicle, bring them to you, and place them in custody with a minimum of danger to you and the subject, correct?
Correct.
And you took this course, right?
Yes.
And you passed this course.
Yes, I did.
And felony stop, the ultimate sort of central feature of it is to have the subject exit the car in your direction, correct?
Correct.
So what happened there at the exit 43 had nothing to do with felony stop, correct?
I don't agree with that.
There was no plan, correct?
There was no formulated plan, correct?
There was no communication with Jackson, correct?
Correct.
And the man did not get out of the car, correct?
Correct.
And you did approach the car, correct?
Correct.
All of which is wrong with felony stops, correct?
No, because it's a dynamic, evolving event.
Well, communication, plan, do not approach the car. Those are pretty straightforward directions. But you claim it's felony stop. All right. From the time of this stop until you fired your gun 7 times, how many words did Mr. Suleiman say?
0.
Did he make any threats to anybody?
Verbal threats?
Verbal threats, yes, words. I'm talking about
No
words.
verbal threats.
And other than Trooper Jackson, as you ran from the driver's side of the car to the passenger side of the car, yelling, "Get out of the car, get out of the car," did Trooper Jackson make direct any words toward Mr. Suleiman?
No.
And given the noise situation that you described with Attorney Riccio, do you think it's likely, or at least possible, that Mr. Suleiman never even heard that?
It's possible.
And you, sir, did you direct any words toward Mr. Suleiman?
No.
Did you, other than telling Jackson, taser, did you say anything to Jackson during this incident?
No.
Okay. Did you consider the fact that Mr. Suleiman's condition, which you've described as out of it, you described as maybe potentially unconscious, might have been due to the collision of the Hyundai with this sports utility vehicle?
I did consider that, yes. I did not deem that to be a conducive reaction based on the collision because it occurred at a low speed.
Put up a picture of the car, please. What is this? Exhibit 73, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you.
So you consider this to be a low impact collision?
A low speed collision, yes.
The whole front of the car is completely, the passenger side smashed in. I mean, the sheet metal is pulled away. The hood is buckled. But your testimony is that that's a low speed collision.
That's correct, sir, based on my experience.
Sure. And Mr. Suleiman did not have a seatbelt on, right?
Correct.
And so you didn't think that his sort of being somewhat out of it might be due to the effect of this collision?
It is possible, but that was not what I was thinking at the time. I thought that was unlikely based on the low speed of the collision, lack of airbag deployment.
Like a scratch and dent fender bender kind of thing, is that it?
No, it's more than that. Vehicles are designed to crumble in collisions to reduce the impact and damage an operator and passengers sustain.
Do you think that Mr. Suleiman might have been suffering some mental health issues? That cross your mind?
No.
Now, thank you. Sure, thank you. You yourself, you've testified to that with Mr. Riccio, do not claim any danger to yourself from this display of a knife, correct?
Correct.
In fact, now that you've seen all the videos and heard the testimony of these officers, in fact, there was no danger to anybody outside of the car from the knife, correct?
Not from what I could see now and after hearing testimony, but what I'm perceiving at the time, there was danger.
What I'm asking you is based on not what your perception is, we'll get to that, but based on fact. You're on one side of the car is windows up, doors locked, you're on one side of the car, Trooper Jackson, Trooper Darling, the West Haven officers are on the passenger side of the car. None of these people are in any danger whatsoever from that knife. Isn't that correct?
If you're asking me to look at that on the information I know now, 4 years later,
I'm asking you to look at it based on the facts that existed back then at that traffic stop.
and once again, what I'm perceiving through my own eyes on scene.
No, not what you're
there's a
perceiving, sir.
threat.
What you know to be true. They're outside the car. The car's locked. The windows are up. Nobody's in danger of anything. Correct?
I don't agree with that.
Okay. All right. Now, you mentioned the written statement that you gave to Attorney Riccio. That statement is dated February 18th, 2020. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'd have to look at the statement, but that sounds right.
And on February 4th, 2020, you and Attorney Ment and Attorney Matthews went to the Chief State's Attorney's office, correct?
Correct.
And you spent 2 hours looking at the videos of Trooper Jackson and yourself, Trooper Darling, both the motor vehicle recordings and the body-worn cameras, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then after that, so 2/4, you looked at the videos with your lawyers, and then about 2 weeks later, the statement was presented to law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
So getting back to the events at the traffic stop or at exit 43. When you were in your position next to the driver's door, you could see into that Hyundai, correct?
Correct.
And because you have indicated in your testimony, the subject was motionless, sitting back in the driver's seat. The seat was slightly reclined, hands were in his lap, eyes were closed, not wearing a seatbelt, wearing a black winter coat. You testified to all that, correct?
Correct.
And after the window shattered, you further testified that the suspect's eyes opened. He moved his right hand to the right front pocket, removed the silver-colored object, turned out to be a knife, serrated blade 4 inches long, tipped toward the roof, serrated edge to the ceiling. And so you could see all that, correct?
Correct.
And your firearm that you had, which was state police issued, it had a flashlight attached to it, correct?
Yes.
And is that something that the state police gave you, or did you purchase that yourself?
That was department issued.
Okay. And are you familiar with that light in terms of its quality and its ability in terms of its brightness?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a 1,000 lumen flashlight, correct?
I don't know the specifications of it.
Okay. Well, you know what an ordinary flashlight luminosity is? You know what that is?
No, I don't.
Is it more than, is that flashlight you had substantially more bright than an ordinary flashlight?
I don't know.
Don't know. Okay. So you talk about this belief that this West Haven officer was entering the vehicle. So is your claim that he was entering the vehicle head first?
It appeared to that, yes.
Okay. So not feet first,
No.
or not, but any. So head first into the vehicle.
Correct.
Okay. When you saw that, and you deduced that because his head dipped below the roofline of the car?
Yes, based location-wise, yes.
Okay. So you're in this situation. Jackson has his taser out, correct?
Correct.
And he is maneuvering to discharge his taser, correct?
Correct.
The West Haven officer has just broken out this window, and he is somewhere on the side of the car. You're claiming that when his head dipped below the roofline, that you drew an inference that he was necessarily crawling through the window of the open window of the car. Is that right?
Correct.
Was there any other information that you had that provided you that ability to make that conclusion?
Yes.
What was that?
The fact that he had just broken the window, and the next step would be to extricate the operator of the vehicle.
Safely, right? Safely.
Ideally, safely, yes.
So you have this flashlight on your gun, right?
Yes.
And you're able to see into the driver's side of the vehicle and discern all this various information about the person that had a seatbelt on, the knife, the serrated edge on the knife, how it was being held. Did you shine the flashlight over to the passenger area to confirm or dispel where this guy's crawling through the window?
No, absolutely not. That would be extremely dangerous.
Really? It's more dangerous than shooting someone in the chest 7 times?
Objection, Your Honor.
What?
No, I'll allow it.
Is that what you're saying? Turning your flashlight an inch for a second is more dangerous than discharging your firearm 7 times in the chest of a 19-year-old person?
We're trained not to use a weapon-mounted light the same as an individual flashlight. So you're asking if I would be pointing my firearm in the direction of 2 officers, which is why I'm saying that, no, that's not feasible. That's not an option.
All right. How about, hey, if you thought he was going into the car, hey, back off, he's got a knife. Would that be a better alternative than firing your gun 7 times?
No.
No, but you didn't do that, did you?
No, I did not do that.
Right. Thank you. Even without pointing your flashlight, there was sufficient light in the interior part of that car to just glance briefly into the interior part of that car to either confirm that he was coming through the window or dispel it, correct?
So based on my angle of vision, I could not see his body through the roof of the vehicle. So I would then have to...
I'm not talking looking through a roof. I'm talking looking at the passenger seat.
Right. So I would have to completely change my stance and move my head down to look through the driver window to see him, to see the West Haven officer.
But you're claiming this is a life and death situation. And so the inconvenience of moving a couple of inches, that's too much to really say, is this person really coming through this window or not? Because dipping his head below the roof line, that's pretty thin evidence to confirm that. So you're saying you chose not to do that?
Correct. Because time is important in that scenario.
Well, isn't it more important to either determine, is this person really coming through this window or not? Isn't that the most important consideration?
If you have the luxury of time.
Well, you made a decision to fire your gun because someone's head dipped below the roofline of a car. You never even consider the fact that I better maybe sort of just verify this, make sure this guy's actually coming into this car. That you never considered that?
So my fear was if I took the time that you are suggesting to do that, that would be more than enough time for the operator of that motor vehicle to stab the West Haven officer in the face or neck.
All right. So your camera was located about how much below your eyes?
I don't have an exact measurement, roughly 20 inches maybe.
Okay. So when we're looking at the body-worn camera, your eyes are 20 inches higher than that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so let's go to the fact check slide. Let's get with North by one camera. Yeah. Let's start around 200. So this is what is it? 57. This is exhibit 57. Exhibit 57, and this is your body-worn camera, Mr. Norton. Yeah, so let's advance through this.
Is that one of the process ones, Mr. Devlin?
Yes, it is. This is the one that
Mr. Lacy?
Mr. Lacy testified to. He had enhanced these through these various filtering
Right,
systems that he has. Right. So let's advance through these. Stop that, please. What number is that? 208. This is frame 208. And from your body worn camera, which is 20 inches below your eyes, you can see Trooper Jackson's head. Is that right?
Yes.
Keep going. And this is Officer Rapper's cap, correct?
I don't know.
You don't, well, keep going. Stop. Isn't that Trooper Rapper's baseball cap?
I can't tell from the photo from here.
And this is 20 inches below your eye level, correct?
Correct.
So that's 216, 219, 219. Keep going. And that's the fire. So go back to 3. So isn't it true that that is the head of Officer Rapper from the West Haven Police Department?
I can't tell from that photo, but I'm not disputing that.
Okay, well then, how many, let's advance the slides. Okay, go back if you can. Okay, go back in. Okay. What slide is that? 218. 218. So slide 218 is Rapper's hat. Advance to the slide that you see the gun part. There. How many slides is that? 23. 23. Okay. So you see Mr. Rapper's hat, Officer Rapper's hat is seen at 216. And at 218, excuse me, at 223, the gun is fired. That's 5 slides. And as the gentleman testified, the time between each of these is 1/30 of a second. So between 5 times 1/30 is something like less than a quarter second. It's your claim that Officer Rapper, whose head you see there, maneuvered himself to be crawling inside the window? Is that your claim?
I don't know if he's crawling inside the window.
Well, sure you do, because that's why you shot the man. That's your claim, right?
Entering the vehicle, I've never used the word crawling, I don't believe.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to mince words with you. You felt that he was in a zone of danger inside that car, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And he did that in less than a quarter of a second from standing up. And this is, again, this view is 20 inches below your eyes. Standing up, you're claiming in less than a quarter of a second, he's able to do that, which you perceive or infer. I'll withdraw that. You directed Trooper Jackson to use his taser, correct?
To go to taser, not to use the taser.
Well, they've broken the window. In the process of breaking the window, you'll tell Jackson, taser, and you're pointing to the side of where your taser is, correct?
Correct.
So that wasn't a communication to him to use his taser?
Correct.
It wasn't, okay. So he just did that on his own.
Correct.
And you saw he was doing that?
I saw he had the taser in his hand and was moving towards the open window.
And
Yes.
taser is a less lethal means of controlling a suspect, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever even wait to see if the taser worked before you fired your gun?
I don't believe there was time for that.
So did you make, so the taser was irrelevant in your consideration?
At the point in time that I discharged my firearm, yes.
Okay. The time between your getting out of your police car and your firing your weapon was approximately 36 seconds. Is that right?
If you're telling me that's what it is, yes.
Okay. And when you arrived there, the scene was under the control of the police department. In a sense, the scene being the car, the driver was, when you first got there, it was under the control of the police department, correct?
You could say that, yes.
I mean, you placed the push bumper of your car near this Trailblazer so he couldn't escape further, correct?
In an effort to prevent that. I wouldn't say that he could not have escaped if he tried to.
Jackson's car was put against the driver's door of the car, of the
Correct.
Hyundai, such that the car couldn't, maybe door might open an inch, but no more than that.
I didn't know that at the time, but after reviewing footage, yes, that's correct.
But anyway, instead of this distance, I mean, Jackson's car is right next to that driver's door. He couldn't get out the driver's side, correct?
Once again, I didn't know that at the time, but after reviewing footage, that is correct.
Okay. And so you talked about de-escalation, but at that juncture, he's in the car, the windows are up, the doors are locked, you're at the driver's side, Jackson at the passenger side, you're both throwing guns. I mean, your testimony was that because he was unconscious, there was no even ability to start de-escalation measures?
That's correct. De-escalation is always preferred, but if someone is not conscious, they're obviously not in an agitated state, so there's no bringing someone down from a baseline of what you could say is zero.
Well, but de-escalation means more than just the sort of frame of mind of the offender, correct?
I'm not sure what you mean by that question.
What I mean by that, you just had this high-speed pursuit, and you've had this situation where, you know, the guy's driving erratically, obviously, and you finally stop the car, and the objective is to take this man into custody on this so-called carjacking charge, right?
Correct.
Okay. And on the felony stop procedures that we just talked about, the objective on a real felony stop would be to get him to voluntarily come out of the car with his hands raised so he's clearly not armed, correct?
Ideally, yes.
Right. But you never even tried the ideal. First off, did anybody communicate? Well, you already told me no. Did anybody communicate with this man using the PA system in your police cars?
No.
Okay. And you could have used that, correct?
The option was there, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, I guess you could say that. You could have used the PA system to try to have some communication with this man, maybe awaken him out of his stupor. You didn't do that.
We did not.
As a matter of fact, everything that was done escalated the situation, correct?
I don't believe so.
Really? So breaking that window did not escalate the situation?
I believe that was one of the causative factors of the situation escalating, yes, but I wouldn't say everything that we did was in an effort to escalate a situation like that.
Well, you certainly, the window was broken, shards of glass are coming into this passenger compartment of this car, probably hitting this driver, correct?
Possibly, yes.
Yeah, sure. And do you think the fact he may have turned in the direction of the passenger would to find out where these shards of glass are coming from that's hitting him in the head?
That's possible.
Sure. But what I'm talking about with this de-escalation is the fact that there was no effort, no even minimal effort to have any communication with this young man, was there?
Aside from the initial commands, no, there wasn't.
Which you probably didn't hear. You already admitted that, correct?
It's possible that he didn't hear them.
But I mean, you have a public address system in your police cars. First off, you could have turned off the sirens in your car, correct?
Correct.
And Jackson could have turned off the siren in his car, correct?
Correct.
And you could have directed the West Haven officers, if their sirens are on, to turn off their sirens, correct?
Correct.
And then it would have been, I know it's noisy down there and cars are going I-95, but you could have used your PA system to at least try to talk to this young man, correct?
Correct.
But you didn't do that. did you?
No,
Instead, you stood by the side, two guys with guns on, and you break the window of the car, correct?
correct.
Would you agree with me, Mr. North, that at that initial phase, before the window was broken, time was on your side?
It depends on what you mean by time is on your side.
What I mean is you got control of the situation. The car is surrounded by police officers, armed. The car can't, you've blocked off the front of the car. Jackson's blocked off the side of the car, and you can simply wait.
Yes,
Right.
There is the factor of time being that the operator of the vehicle appears to be unconscious.
Right. And you could try to use your PA system to wake him up. Or you could try to do some other ways to wake him up. Or you could just wait and just wait. Time is on your side, correct?
Once again, it depends on the limit of time you're trying to put on this. If he's unconscious and not breathing, then I believe you go brain dead in 4 to 6 minutes roughly.
Right. But you've described him as mostly out of it, not unconscious. Didn't you use the phrase out of it?
Out of it, unconscious,
No, that's two
unresponsive.
different things. You described him as out of it, correct?
Correct. I said he appeared to be out of it.
Right. So the statements that the jury has heard, the oral statements that you made on scene there to Trooper Richter and Sergeant Kiley, completely refute your explanation that you've given this morning, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, I claim the question.
Could you withdraw the question and explain what you mean to the witness so he can understand?
Sure. I'll withdraw the question. Thank you. The explanation that you provided to Trooper Richter and to Sergeant Kiley when they asked you what had happened was completely inconsistent with the explanation you've given to the jury this morning, correct?
No, I completely disagree with that.
Okay, well, let's hear it. Let's play Sergeant Kiley's, let's play Trooper Richter's oral statement. How do you do that? 47. Okay, let's play 47.
Which guy, Mr. Dutton?
I'm sorry.
Which person's,
This is Mr. North talking to Trooper Colin Richter. Yeah. That's our, here.
Stopped. He was like unconscious, it looked like. And then he came through and they broke the window. Yeah. And then first thing he did, reached in his pocket, pulled out a knife. Okay. And that's when I was protected.
He reached in his pocket and pulled out a knife, and that's what I fired. That's what you told Trooper Richter, correct?
I don't know what the last word was based on that audio, but I'm not.
Well, no. What do you recall the last? You were there. You said it. What was the last word?
I don't remember that conversation that I had with Richter.
Okay. So you do not remember anything about it?
That conversation, no. And that's after reviewing your report and watching these videos the last several days. I do not remember that conversation at all.
So you can remember almost everything else about this incident with exquisite detail, but this conversation where you don't mention any West Haven officer going into the car, you don't mention Jackson being in danger, you don't mention the fact that you thought you had to fire your gun to save these people's lives, you don't mention that to Richter, correct?
Correct.
Please, Kylie, please. This is asking that Mr. North's statements to Sergeant Kylie be played. Sergeant Hennessy's body worn camera. How's it going? Good. Everybody okay? All right.
You want to give me a quick synopsis of what happens when the bosses are asking? Just at the end of the
You want to give me a quick synopsis? So when the bosses start asking, that's what Sergeant Crowley asked you about, correct?
Yes.
And so you knew that what you were saying to Sergeant Crowley was going to go to the highest ranking members of the Connecticut State Police Department, correct?
Yes.
Wait.
No, I mean, I saw most of the stuff up on the highway.
You saw like the DA.
Yeah.
Guy here, who basically, I guess Jack, kind of like got boxing behind the other car that was just in the right lane. Then Jackson kind of pulled up here. So then I went around the front. We get out, Felony stop at his driver's side door. Jackson's on the other door, both have runs out. The guy's kind of like out of it. You know, for the he was passed out. And West Haven got here, he opened the passenger side window. And then I guess we'll put it.
Stop it, please. So you glanced directly at Sergeant Hennessy there, correct? You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And instantaneously, he turns off the audio portion of his body-worn camera, correct?
It appears that way.
Right. And you claim that's just a coincidence, right?
I don't think I'd ever claimed that.
Okay. Well, then you gave him a look to communicate to him, hey, turn off your camera, man. No, you didn't do that?
No.
No. Well, he looks at, you look at him and he just turns off the camera. Okay. Say the rest, please. Stop it. So you gesture to the side and you pull your hand up directly in front of your body. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was that gesturing about the display of a knife?
Yes, I believe so.
Play it, please. Okay. So what was the rest of the words you said to Sergeant Kelly there that are not recorded?
I don't know the exact words.
Well, the gist of it.
I would assume the gist of it would be along the lines of me firing my weapon.
Okay. And did you take issue with the version of that that's recorded in the exhibit in trial here? The exhibit 5, which is Sergeant Kylie's police report?
No.
So you're not claiming that's inaccurate?
No.
You're not claiming that's incomplete?
I'm not sure what you mean by incomplete. It's
Okay. Let's have exhibit 5. So I'm going to read Exhibit 5. I then asked Trooper North to give me a quick synopsis of what happened. Trooper North explained that after the suspect crashed into another vehicle, he and Trooper Jackson positioned their cruisers to box the suspect in. Trooper North explains that he approached the driver's side of the suspect vehicle while Trooper Jackson approached the passenger side. Trooper North further explained that he was utilizing felony stop procedures at this point. He explained that the suspect initially appeared to be quote unquote out of it, but when the West Haven police officer shattered the passenger side window, the suspect was startled and came to. Trooper North stated that the suspect then reached into his waistband and pulled out a knife. Trooper North stated that he subsequently fired his duty weapon. So do you disagree that's the account that Sergeant Kiley submitted in his sworn police report? Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that.
So this opportunity that you had with Sergeant Kiley to give him information that would be transmitted to the highest level of the Connecticut State Police. That's what you said, correct?
Correct.
And the fact that you're claiming here that you fired your weapon to save another police officer's life, you did not take the opportunity to tell that to Kiley so it would go to the higher ups in the Connecticut State Police Department?
Correct.
Correct. So the one thing that would actually justify your conduct, the most important thing in this whole case, you don't mention that.
No.
And you don't mention it to Richter when you're walking out of this tunnel here before that, did you?
No.
Jim Riggio asked you about 7 shots. And in fact, you know now that you discharged your firearm 7 times in connection with firing into the window and striking Mr. Suleiman, correct?
Correct.
Each firing of a bullet from a firearm of the type you had is a use of deadly force, correct?
No, it goes by engagement.
No, I'm asking you as a matter of just common sense. Each time you fire a gun, fire a bullet from a gun, you are engaging in force that can cause death or serious physical injury, correct?
You're saying each trigger pull is lethal force?
Yeah.
Yes.
Each bullet coming out of the muzzle of a gun can cause death, correct?
Correct.
Each bullet that comes out of the muzzle of a gun can cause serious physical injury, correct?
Correct.
And so each time you pull that trigger under the law has to be justified, correct?
Yes.
You don't get to fire just as many times as you feel like it, correct?
Correct.
So in your use of deadly force matrix, isn't there a requirement that the trooper is to assess the need to use force and then use force and then reassess? It's like a circular diagram they have.
Yes, that's correct.
So you assess the need to use force or the degree of force you're going to use, and then you use it, and then you reassess. Okay. Well, after you decided you had to fire that first shot, did you reassess?
Immediately after the first shot?
Yeah. After you used deadly force directed at the center mass of Mubarak Suleiman, did you reassess?
No, not at that point.
After you fired the second shot into the center mass of his body, did you reassess whether you needed to do it?
No.
After you fired the third shot into his chest, did you reassess the need to do it?
No.
After you fired the fourth shot into his chest, did you reassess the need to do it?
No, we could skip it. It's at the
Can't
the
skip
seventh
it.
shot.
It's
Okay.
each trigger pull is the use of deadly force. You already admitted that. And your guidelines say reassess. Look, isn't it true that if you shot that young man one time, probably this notion that you claim this person's climbing through the window, you would have been able to dispel that instantly because there's nobody climbing through the window, correct?
No.
No. Okay. If you shot him one time, I mean, you're about 10 minutes away from one of the world-class trauma centers in the world at Yale Hospital. I mean, there'd be a chance to save his life, correct?
Possibly, yes.
Sure. I mean, if you fired once, you and assess the situation, you could assess, well, was this West Haven officer actually climbing through the window? Would that have been so difficult?
Sorry, what is your question in that?
My question is, after you fired your gun one time into the center mass of Mubarak Suleiman, and you reassess as you're required to do, you could have made a determination if this inference you claim you made because the head dipped below the roofline was in fact true or not, correct?
Yes.
Correct. But you didn't do that.
After the first shot?
Correct.
No, correct.
Right. This firing of this gun into the passenger compartment of that car, that endangered the other police officers in the vicinity of that car, didn't it?
I don't believe so.
You don't believe so? So there was a bullet strike right next to the seat, sort of toward the shoulder of the driver. Are you saying that there wasn't a real risk that those shots could have penetrated through the car and struck the officers on the other side of the car?
With ricochet, that's possible.
Well, it could ricochet. You're going through glass. You're going through a car. The trajectory of those bullets could have changed, correct?
Correct.
And if, as you claim, which was not true, but if, as you claim, the West Haven officer was actually proceeding into the car, he could have gotten shot, correct?
From ricochet, yes, it's possible.
Well, I mean, Whether you get shot from ricochet or directly, you're still shot, correct?
Correct.
You know, I know it's 10 minutes before lunch, but honestly, could we take the lunch break now? And I'm almost done my examination. I want to check over my notes. It'd be much more efficient for me to do it over lunch break. Maybe ask a few more questions of the witness, and then we can proceed.
Yeah,
So I'm requesting a lunch break at this time, Your Honor.
I see no objection, and it'll be an hour, okay? It's 10 up. So, yeah.
All rise.